welcome you back to another episode of Between Us and Y'all. I'm Yasmin.
I'm Nafees.
And this is Between Us and Y'all, a podcast created for mothers and their young adult sons to have healthy conversations and have a safe space to do so. We have some guests with us today that we're going to be introducing shortly. And they are also going to be sharing with us, as we normally do for every episode, some information on a local business. So, our guests.
Hey, we're excited to be here with you guys. My name is Adero Prescott. I am his mom, and I also have two other children, Niara and Zion, and they are 14 and 11, and I'm married, and we live in Atlanta, Georgia, out in the suburbs, and I'm actually working part-time with Quilombo Academic and Cultural Institute as a virtual assistant.
Cool.
Hey everybody, I'm Nadir, and I'm 21, a Prescott College student, her son. And I'm a senior, a rising senior at Prescott College in Arizona, and born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. I love to make music, and I'm studying regenerative ecological design.
Wow, I love that.
Oh, and I forgot to mention I'm from Philly.
Okay. All right. You have a business that you were going to share some information with us about?
Yes. Okay. So it's a youth entrepreneurship group and known as the Nzuri Drummers. And they were started here in Atlanta, Georgia by a dynamic duo of best friends, Zion Harris and Kayam Ubaka Blackmore. And they were students at Quilombo Academic and Cultural Institute. They started the business in 2016 as a way to share what they had learned from drumming classes at Quilombo. And it grew into a thriving business. And now they are 5 drummers strong, and occasionally they have African dancers from some of the grads and some of the current students at Quilombo. And to book with them, you just go to their website, which is www.thenzuri-drummers, that's N like Nancy, Z-U-R-I, drummers.com, and also known as the Nzuri Drummers on Instagram. And they also have merchandise.
Okay.
This is one of the mama shirts because my daughter dances with them.
I love that.
But they have all kinds of t-shirts and different paraphernalia on their website. So check them out.
Wow, thank you for sharing. The school that she mentioned for our listeners, Quilombo Academic and Cultural Institute, is actually the school that both these young men graduated from in middle school. So we give big ups to Quilombo all the time for the foundation that they're laying for our community, and our community family. And we also wanted to just add a little bit as far as what we know about Adero, Mama Adero and Nadir. We've been friends for maybe over about 5 or 6 years, but maybe a little longer than that. But
yeah, maybe a little longer. Yeah, maybe 6, 7. I think 6. I think you're right. Yeah,
7 years. Yeah, we've been friends for a long time, and we've both, been working hard to raise young men and, put them in schools that were really good and make sure that they remain connected. And we're grateful that they're still friends, to this day. We look to you for an example, Mama Adero and Nadir, for a great mom and son duo, so we want to thank you both for being here, and thank you for being my son's friend, so that I know if he ever needs an example of somebody who's paving the way for college or whatever, he has an example that he can look to in you, Nadir.
Oh, thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you.
All right, so our topic today, we're continuing a conversation that we started on the topic of international relations, and today we're going to be focusing specifically on maintaining your identity with interracial relationships and the impact of international travel. Oftentimes, when we're having conversations with our young men or our young women who are going off to school, who are coming from traditional African-centered backgrounds, we're not having conversations about how to prepare yourself to deal with the regular world, and
right.
When people are just interacting with other people, they're having a hard time navigating, and we need to be able to hold our foundation wherever we go, but we also need to be able to interact on a regular basis, network, and, invite whoever into our network that we like, but also be able to maintain our identity while we're doing that. So that's the purpose of our conversation today. And so our listeners, as we normally do with every time we have guests, we like to start with our standard question. And this has to do with our family motto. So our family motto is to work hard, pray hard, love hard, and play hard. Do you all have a family motto? And if so, what is it?
So, okay. When Nadir went through rights, we were actually asked to come up with like a family motto or something, or like a family code. And so we briefly developed something. And when you asked the question, I was like, oh, wait, we haven't even been like really utilizing it. But we do have it, and it still stands for us. When I was talking to Nadir about it earlier, like, oh, this does stand for our family. So it's actually a really good one. And it's a quote from Maya Angelou. If you get, give.
And if you learn, teach.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And did you want to elaborate on it, or?
Well, when I heard it this morning, I was reminded of it because I completely forgot that was even a part of rights and everything, to be honest. But it makes sense to me because I think we always talk about like each one teach one, and just keeping the culture going, and making sure that everybody's involved and that we leave nobody behind, all these like principles. And she says it in those few words really well. And I think our family does that really well. We're all really generous with each other, and also making sure that even though communication could always be a troublesome thing in families, we don't leave each other behind, and we make sure that everybody has the opportunity to rise above where in the areas that we need to, and together as a family, instead of just one person advancing.
Right. Totally agree.
I love that. And for our listeners, first, thank you for sharing with us that amazing motto. We really like that. And it's something that if you don't have a motto, listeners, it's something you can adapt if you'd like to take the motto from this family, because I really like it. And for the people that were listening, if you heard Nadir or his mom say that he went through a rights program, this is something that community members do sometimes to prepare their young men or young women, through a rites of passage program. So that's what he's referring to. And we won't go into details about what happened at the rights program, but it was something to prepare him, to navigate his life, into adulthood. And I think it paid off very well.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So for our next question, I know that Nadir, you've gone off to school. You've been a rising senior. And Adero, I'm sure you work with different people every day, just like we all do. So how important is it to you to maintain your identity when engaging in interracial relationships?
Well, I definitely, that was a huge concern for us when he chose the school that he wanted to attend. Of course, he's out in Prescott, Arizona, and he's an extreme minority being out there. I don't even know what the percentage is, but it's pretty low.
Oh.
Well, right. So there are a lot of Caucasians. He's in the minority when it comes to race.
Okay.
And, and so coming from the environment that where he lives in Atlanta, that could have been detrimental for him for a college experience. And so we definitely were concerned before he left to go off to school, and we discussed it. We didn't discuss it heavily. It was a brief discussion just to check in with him to see if he was concerned about it at all. And making sure that he didn't lose all the things that we have been instilling in him throughout the years. And we do regular check-ins from freshman year up to now, going into his senior year. How's he feeling? What are some things that are happening with interaction in school with your peers, different things like that. And he's been able to, and I'll let him elaborate on that, but he's been able to really build a circle of great friendships out there in Prescott all on his own, and staying open and keeping his community tight-knit here in Atlanta in conversation as well as with myself and my husband, Dale.
Oh, that's what's up. Nadir?
Do you want to elaborate on it?
So when I was thinking about Arizona, I was really focusing on the environment, and that was probably one of the most important things to me about selecting a college. And being on the West Coast and seeing just environments I'd never seen before in Atlanta or in the South was also like very exciting to me. And it didn't even really occur to me that the ethnicity or the diversity of ethnicity would be drastically different. And so even when we landed in Phoenix, I was like, where did I choose to go to school? Because it was straight up desert. It was super hot. and I didn't see any grass, any green, and I was like, whoa, like I don't know if I made the right decision. And as the years have gone by, the most challenging things have been the communicating across races, across ethnicities, and just trying to get used to how different communities of people communicate with each other, and how I can communicate with those people in the best way possible. And at first I was really afraid that my ideas about like the world and everything and what I've been taught and what I believe myself was not going to be compatible, and I wasn't going to be able to make really great relationships with people. But as soon as I started trusting myself to just be authentic and be able to share what I think and all these things, those people that I could vibe with definitely came. And it gave me a great lesson in terms of don't try to bring prejudice or what we think about another group of people to every relationship, and make sure that that filter is on but not like blocking the possibilities.
Wow, I love that. I love that response. The thing is, coming from African-centered communities, oftentimes, we're preparing our children to love how Black they are and love their Blackness or love their culture and all those types of things. But we're not having conversations about how to have healthy relationships with people that don't look like you. And so oftentimes what happens is when our children leave the community, they are not prepared, and they're not prepared to hold on to what they've learned and to see that as something that they can still be proud of in a group that doesn't look like them, because they've never learned to, have an equal exchange. And I remember when you went to academe, I've intentionally put Nafees in a school in high school, after coming from Quilombo, all Black, pro-Black, everything in that way, to a school that was full of children from all over the world, because I wanted him to be able to practice early on to see does any of the stuff that you say you believe really stand true? Is this foundation a real thing that you can hold when you're not amongst people who look like you? Because it's easy to say, I believe in all this and I love all this when everybody looks like you and everybody's saying the same thing, but then you start to be able to network and see, how does this work when I'm in a larger group? How does it turn into something that's a networking tool as opposed to just something that makes me feel good in the moment? And so it sounds like, Nadir, that you are paving the way again, where you're kind of showing, what does it look like? And, for those people that are coming behind you, you and Nafees from Quilombo or whatever schools, or even our listeners from throughout the country who are coming from, isolated kind of smaller, environments, and they're preparing for a larger environment and how to maintain your identity in that way. So
Absolutely.
The next question is,
speak up.
What does maintaining your identity look like when you're interacting with other African people?
What does that look like? Like, for the listeners who don't know, and are not African, what does it look like for you when we're interacting with each other? Like, if you had to describe that in just a few words, what would that be? What would you say?
I think something that was important to me is like bringing I don't know what the word is, but I guess putting myself inside of the spaces to celebrate my African culture or the heritage and things. Because one thing that we did was a graduate student was working with the Black Student Union at Prescott College to create this festival called the Black Arts Festival. And it was for her thesis project. And she asked me, did I have any speakers or anything that I wanted to bring? And I thought of one of the co-founders of my high school, Mama Adero, at I Educational Institute. And she decided that she would want to come, and we paid for her to come, and it was a wonderful time. But being able to bring her and like share African culture with African people that live in Prescott, Arizona, and the Black students that go to Prescott College, that was a powerful opportunity for all of us to share in our culture and make sure that we keep it there. And there was also other races of people that came to that festival, and they were able to explore and understand our culture from our perspective and not really get the steeped European view of African culture that we often get in academia. And I think when, like, one of the challenges in BSU was me having like an African Center education, and other Black people that were in BSU not having that perspective. And we had, after the Black Arts Festival, someone was really frustrated because he felt as if, okay, without getting into details, he was just mad and he was trying to express that and he was yelling at everybody. And I was trying to be
Calm.
the in-between force of like helping everybody to express themselves without hurting each other in a very intense way, and breaking up the group. And I don't know if it was completely successful, but those type of things, being able to share our culture and make sure that we change the ways that we've been taught to hurt each other in subtle ways, redoing that. I don't know if that makes sense, but
no, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, I think my experience coming from Philadelphia in the inner city, all Black community, and then I guess observing my mother when she was working at the fire department and hearing how she would communicate with people on the customer service level, and dealing with all types of races, whether she was dealing with Black people, Asian, white, no matter who she was speaking with in a professional arena. She changed her voice, the tone of her voice, how she spoke, whether she was articulate, and my sister and I would call it my mother's name is Shahida, so my sister and I would call it the Shahida voice. And so we picked up on it. So when we started working professionally in corporate America, we did the same thing because we felt like it was a better way to communicate across the board with all types of people if you want to communicate clearly, right? And of course, when we're hanging out with our friends, we didn't speak that way. But I think I never really looked at it as this is only how I'm going to communicate with non-African or African American or Black people. It was more of, if I'm in a professional environment, I'm going to communicate this way, regardless of where I am. Like right now, if I'm at Quilombo and I'm working with them, I'm going to speak a certain way when I'm communicating with them. But then when I'm off the clock, I'm communicating with them like they're my friends, they're my homies. And so for me, it was never
an example of that voice. I think we need to hear the professional voice.
You need it. Hi, this is Adero. And it gets doors open. So
that's real though.
Yeah.
It's interesting when you were talking, I started to think about my identity amongst African people, is interesting because as a Muslim, there's a whole different arena when it comes to being a Black Muslim, you know what I mean? And a Black Muslim who subscribes to being an African, you know what I mean? There's Black people who, maybe that guy in the BSU that you talked about, Nadir, some people don't identify as being African people, they just think they have Black skin and they don't know. In my mind, I just imagine they just think they just arrived somewhere. They don't think that it came from somewhere.
Right.
Yeah, for sure.
The thing is, it's like, I identify as an African person. So I have many African American Muslim friends who see my way of living as, forbidden, basically. Where, and so my way of maintaining my identity is to just be very consistent and to also be very transparent with what I believe, and how that won't change based on somebody else's, views, because it's who I am.
Right. And I totally agree with that, because you're going to get the same person when I'm communicating with you. Like, I'm going to be authentic. You may just get a different tone of voice,
right,
and different words.
Yeah, exactly.
But I'm going to be at the character of it. I'm going to be the same person.
Yeah. After a while, people will learn to appreciate that, because the professionalism is why you have been hired, and to do the job. And they can also believe that they can trust you because you're a friend who's consistent also at the end of the
Absolutely.
day. How about you?
I think in terms of maintaining identity
with African people,
kind of all the lines what Nadir was saying, basically, like, I feel like sometimes it's a challenge, coming from a conscious community and like going to HBCU. And it's like, sometimes I feel like it's challenging to have certain conversations because the mass majority there, wasn't raised up, in a conscious community. So, in regards to talking about history or just talking about anything, sometimes I feel like, oh, I gotta take a step back because they might not understand what I'm talking about, or they might
Right.
or believe me. So I definitely have to figure out to put it in a more understandable way, and not shying away from like, oh, this is not
what you believe.
Yeah, I'm not trying to say like, oh, since this is what I believe, I'm not going to tell anybody. I'm just going to keep it to myself. More so putting it in a way so it's like, what you're saying is not wrong, but I feel like you should look at it this way.
Different perspective.
A different perspective, because it's always good to have open conversations and not telling somebody you're wrong.
Right.
True.
Right.
Yeah.
So you had a second part to your question.
And the second part of the question is what does it look like with an interracial relationship?
Maintaining your identity in interracial relationships. What does that actually look like practically?
I think I think my first approach to it was a lot of hiding it, and not really like hiding in terms of oh my God, I can't let them know this part of me, but just that it doesn't, like Nafees was just saying, like taking a step back and not necessarily saying something when it's needed to be said. But all that did for me was really build up a lot of emotional responses inside of me without really being able to express them by myself. And so then I started addressing it, and like something just recently happened where one of my past professors, she was holding up the Rastafarian symbol that you do with your hands, and one of my yeah, exactly, that symbol. And I learned about that while I was traveling in Cuba, and that was the first time I heard about that. And I was like, oh wow, okay. And then one of my Mexican friends, he sent that picture to me. He was like, she throwing up gang signs, and I'm like, that's not a gang sign. And I had to educate him. And then previous me would have probably been like, it doesn't even matter. Like he might not even meet a Rasta person, like just let it blow over. But I had to, because I feel like it is a part of, even though I'm not Rastafarian, it is not, I don't want somebody to misinterpret that. And it's also about like caring about the relationship that I do have, and not just trying to brush over things, because they affect how I feel about the relationship. And I think that it'll make us both conscious and aware of each other more if we are able to have like clear conversations about things that make us uncomfortable, or just understanding each other's cultures better. And that deepens the relationship more than it makes it uncomfortable, I think.
Yeah, I think for me, I'm actually learning through Nadir, as far as even wanting to be brave enough to have interracial friendships and relationships, because I've had one and it didn't go so well. And after that, I was kind of like, I'm good, All of my other interracial relationships have been professional ones at work, and that's where they stayed. They may have known that I was married and had children, but that was about as much that I would allow them to know about me. And I think for me, it's just about breaking down barriers for myself, as far as walls that I've built up throughout the years from learning information. I mean, history teaches us how people behave. And, one of the previous points that Nadir made about basically just allowing people to one-on-one basis show you who they are, and not prejudge just based on someone's race, and so it's a process for me. It really is. It's a process. And so if I'm given the opportunity, I may work on that, have some friendships that are non-African American, non-African,
or not.
but I'm not.
Exactly.
What you say? You said what?
We are not. If it doesn't
We're
happen.
not. We're not. I'm not gonna force it.
Kind of to go off what they said, like I think I really experienced those type of conversations in high school, kind of like what you said, Nadir, along the lines of like how maybe Rastafarians may do a thing, and then like, people may misinterpret it. I think I really experienced that in high school, where I would be going to school with people across the world, and they would like ask me questions about Black culture, and I know for me it's I know it's not coming off as being racist or being just being mean. It's just more so of understanding. So it's like, yeah, like, oh, I know that, I've seen this on the internet and you guys may do this, but I want to know if that's really true. And I was like, I can give my real answer. So it's not, sometimes I might get a little mad because it might be in the moment, but I know, it's coming from a place of curiosity and not just, just trying to hurt someone's feelings. I definitely think.
Right.
For me, that's the thing of when I'm maintaining my identity amongst, with interracial conversations. Coming from California is where I was born and raised, so I had to do two culture, changes coming from there and then coming to Atlanta, where before all my best friends growing up were Hawaiian, or from Cambodia, you know what I mean, or Mexican, because that was my neighborhood, in San Francisco, California. Then moving to Oakland, there's Mexicans and Asians and Blacks, so when I came here and all my friend choices were only Black, it was like different, you know what I mean? I'm used to different stuff, different foods, different conversations and things like that. But one of the things that I've learned being in Atlanta is when I'm having conversations or interacting with anyone that's outside of my race, I refuse to be the representative of all Black people. I'm not the representative for all Black people. And that's the first thing I always make sure people know, that I cannot answer all questions for Black people. I can answer the questions for me and my family, my history, what I've been through, but this is not reflective of every single Black person you'll ever meet. So it's fair for you to think, just because Yasmin likes burritos, with a little Adero don't like the same thing. Like, it's just not
right.
So I try to make sure that that's one of the things. And then I find myself being a little guarded, when I'm in the workspace or the corporate world with interracial relationships. If it's somebody who's trying to get close to me, because of our current society and what we're dealing with race, it's something I can't avoid, you know what I mean? So oftentimes I won't pretend that I'm gonna be, all hunky-dory and hanging out, we can be cool and all of that, because I don't know if I can trust you, just just like Ahmaud, Arbery, who just was murdered, in February.
Exactly.
He could not trust his neighbors. He run into the neighborhood, and all of a sudden somebody thinks that he's a threat. So for me, I have to think about those types of things, because the reality is that might be the case, that one person I'm working with and I thought I could trust may not really like me, honestly, So I try to keep it balanced where I'm not an angry person walking around. I do my job, but at the same time, at the back of my mind, I'm thinking I have to be on guard in a sense about some things when it comes to race, because we live in the South and we live in a place that is racially charged when it comes to things that I may not be aware of. So, but when it comes to family, it's African first. That's going to be my family, and that I don't, I'm unapologetically Black in that way. And I love my race. It's not a thing that has to do with being defensive or anything like that. It's just something I'm very proud of. So,
absolutely.
That's my family. So next question, I want to know about you all's conversation. When you're having conversations, how do you approach a conversation regarding maintaining your identity when you're engaging in interracial relationships with people who are not of the same race? Like, what advice do you give to each other? Because you've talked about when you're doing it on your own, but when you're talking to each other, Adero, what type of stuff did you tell Nadir, when you were like, when you got this teacher who's white and,
real talk. Yeah.
I mean, parents are not having those conversations, and our children,
no, they're not
on their own,
So this is a great question, because it has definitely come up, with different challenges when it comes to just communication. And so I don't necessarily tell Nadir what to say or what to do. It's more of me listening to him and then giving him the space to kind of work it out as we're talking through whatever the challenge may be. And then as we're discussing it, he's coming up with resolutions. He's coming up with, oh, well, maybe I could try this on, or I might say to him, try this on, like, have you considered, the position? Because what I try to do is to remove the race when it comes to his communication with his professors specifically. And depending on what the challenge is, I'll just ask him, well, what led up to that point? What led up to this moment? And just try to break it down, and not so that he doesn't take it on as a personal attack, right? So that's typically how the conversations end up with a really good resolution, and then he's able to go back and apply whatever we've discussed. And from what I remember, it usually works out because he's able to then, build his confidence and go back and address whatever the issue may be, or, come back with a different solution that he can work out with his professors. And right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I've observed, and it's been good as far as I know of.
Yeah, I could tell you. Okay, this is not a professor, but one time, I don't know. Well, we didn't talk about screenings, the story, yeah. But one of my friends, she was like coming over to just say goodbye because she was moving, and she was talking about a mutual friend of ours and how they were just like talking to each other, and all of a sudden, you remember this story, like she felt as if, and the friend that came over to my house, she's Black too, and she felt as if she needed to say that my other friend who was not Black, that she felt that she was an energy draining person, and like that it was not a healthy relationship for any of us to have with her. And I didn't know what that was about. Like, I didn't know if it was a race thing or, and I didn't have no problem. I didn't know how to handle it. And so what I said was just okay in the moment. And we said our goodbyes and things. And then I called Mom afterwards, and I was just talking to her about all the things that I brought up. And mainly it was just like a major fear because I didn't know if my friend wanted me to side with her. And this is something that also I see on social media a lot. And I don't know if this is going on a tangent, but just people, I think this is a dynamic that needs to be talked about more, but just Black people, how we communicate with each other on social media, and when other races enter the conversation, how we involve them in the conversation. Because when I was talking to my mom, it brought up a lot of fear. That conversation I had with my Black friend brought up a lot of fear in terms of like what she expected of me. Did she want me to call up the other person and be like, you need to get your stuff together? I don't know, like to check her or anything else. Like, what was my expectation here? And should I like have to step in as a certain role as a Black man, or just as her friend, or anything? And what ended up happening is like they resolved it on their own, because that's really what we came up with in our conversation, was just that's between them. And then what my relationship is with our mutual friend, that's between me and that person. And what I decide to do with that person is my business, and vice versa. So yeah.
Yeah.
Maintaining your identity in interracial relationships.
You go first.
All right, so our situation is a little unique, with this. I'll speak for myself first, and then I'll speak as a parent, So at work, it can be a little bit strange, because I work in a predominantly Black, corporate environment where there are a few people from the other races, But the thing that's interesting sometimes is that, I find what you said, Nadir, the whole thing about should I be siding with this person happen a lot. Because one interesting thing that happened last year during Ramadan is I found out there were all these secret Muslims at my job, that hadn't told anybody they were Muslim, for some reason. They were hiding, their religion. And it was intentional that they didn't want anybody to know, you know what I mean? Right. When I had came and I'm like, they have all these holidays. We got to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and decorations for Valentine's Day, whatever the holiday is, stuff I never even heard of, really. A rugby day or something like that. I never heard of that stuff. There's all these holidays and decorations, and I just asked the question one time, well, what about Ramadan? I've never seen you all have any decorations up for the Muslims, and they were like, well, there are no Muslims here. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm sure there's Muslims here. And then it turns out there were like 15 people, and all Muslim. But then when I made that announcement, I found it really strange that then they wanted to outwardly show that we're Muslim and we're strong, and now you guys have to give us all these things, So I never asked for any of that stuff. I just wanted some decorations. I didn't need anything else. So it was really strange for me because I found myself feeling like I had become the spokesman for something for these people who were now saying, now you have to advocate for our extraness, when that didn't reflect at all what I wanted, So that's the religion part. Then as a parent, it's been really strange, being a parent of somebody who's at an HBCU. you know, I went to an HBCU myself, Tuskegee University, and Nafees he goes to Alabama A&M. And I'm finding that although it's a predominantly Black college, there are not new African students that are there, you know, and so in a sense, it's almost like another race that he's interacting with, because there's many people who have no idea about what we're talking about. You know, we come to school and I'm wanting to invite his friends with us to come to lunch, and I'm asking them about, you know, community life, or, you know, I'm asking them about how do you pray, you know, what do you do for your ancestors, little questions like that, and they looking at me like
like, what is she talking about?
Strange, you know. So sometimes it could be a little bit strange, but what I try to do is just be my consistent self and offer a little bit of an explanation without being too overbearing. So instead of saying, you know, what did you do for your ancestors last night, I asked them, you know, what do you think of the idea of, you know, showing respect for your ancestors or the people that have died in your family? Do you ever pray for your grandmother? You know, do you pray for that aunt that you love so much? And if you do, what does that look like? You know, and that ends up opening a conversation with them to where they can feel like it's not like voodoo or, you know, I'm in Atlanta, but I'm actually
right.
There are people in their family.
I like that. That's a good approach. I like that.
I guess the conversation that we always had is just kind of always have an open mind.
Okay.
And, you know, don't always think that, like, kind of the point I was touching earlier, just know that sometimes people are just really asking out of curiosity, and sometimes how the question may come off as negative, and so don't, you know, sometimes you don't have to answer the question. So I've always, I guess some of the advice that she'll always give me is, you know, you don't always have to be telling everybody like detail for detail of what you got going on in terms of, you know, your identity and something like that. You just need to let them know, like, hey, this is what I do, and
whatever you're comfortable with.
Yeah, this is what I got going on, and that's it. You know, it doesn't have to be, you know, I'm telling you a whole scroll of, you know, what I've been through and all this stuff like that. So definitely doing that, and just also being open to hear what they have to say, you know, because there might be some things that they think of what we got going on, or there might be some things that I think they might have going on. So always express those so you can learn how to have those conversations that might be uncomfortable, or, you know, any conversation, so you can not have that place of disagreement.
Yeah, and before we continue, I wanted to add, you know, as you were talking, Nafees, it made me think about sometimes when we're having conversations with people that are not of the same race, sometimes we feel like we have to explain things that usually relate to something negative. We're talking about racism, or we're talking about police brutality, or we're talking about making sure they understand that we're not disrespected when it comes to the food you provide at this event, you know.
Yeah.
It usually is a disrespectful kind of negative conversation. So for me, I try to make sure that when I'm having conversations with somebody who may be curious about my race or something that's different to them, that I make sure the conversation includes something positive. You know, like we are, as Black people, we're not only living a life that's based on negativity. Like we live regular lives. We like to go shopping. We like fruit, you know, we like relationships. We do all types of things that are very, but oftentimes the only things people are learning about us have to do with what they see in the news, which is negative, you know, so.
Which is by design.
Right, exactly. So that's, I try to make sure that the conversation involves something that's not necessarily, you know, negative, so that they can understand. It can be relatable, but at the same time, I don't owe you this huge explanation, you know, of every single thing that's ever happened in the life of a Black person.
Right.
True.
But the next question is, do you feel responsible for representing the identity of others with your race when you are engaging with others outside of your race?
And we kind of touched on this already, but my thing now is kind of like, you know, offering advice for people that are listening, you know, for when you're having a conversation or you're trying to give advice to your young adult about maintaining their identity or representing themselves, the importance of not having to be the main representative. Like, what does that conversation actually sound like? What types of things do you all say to each other? What type of conversation?
I think for me, it's been more of like sharing my personal experiences, because I had something happen when I was working in corporate America that was similar to what you expressed a little earlier on, about us basically not being a monolith. And, you know, I was new on a job, receiving training from just another employee who had been there for a long time, and she was a white woman, and she made a comment after several days in with the training, you're so different than the others that I've trained.
Mm.
And I was like, what do you mean? Like, what do you mean? Because immediately I'm thinking, that's where race is. Like, but I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, just giving her a little space. Like, what do you mean? So, and she's like, I mean, you guys, you're different. Like the way that you're picking up the information, the way that you're communicating, you're different. And I was just like, and I felt the responsibility of expressing to her, we're not all the same. Like, I am who I am and they're who they are. We're all very different. We're not the same. And I kind of just shut it down and left it at that and kept my space. But, whenever, and there have been other opportunities at the office where situations like that have come up in different ways. And I have felt the pressure of wanting to defend and stand up for my people, especially if, because of the fact that we do all communicate differently, it doesn't mean that I'm doing the job any better than they are. We just communicate differently, and that's okay. And I have had to express things like that with other departments and other managers and directors, and it can be really draining. And I felt like then I was definitely a lot younger. I would approach it differently now. I probably would just straight up ignore it, not even respond to it. Whereas though then I felt like it was my responsibility to defend my coworkers who were Black and who were women and who were my friends, who I did build friendships with. And I did feel the pressure of, I don't want them to look down on them because we all individually express ourselves differently, because we're all doing the same job and we're all doing it well, and I think for me, I always come home and share those type of experiences with my children, and I think that your sister and your brother are able to, on their levels, to go back and to use those examples for themselves when they go out into the world. And I always give them that responsibility because I do think that they need to make up their mind on their own how they're going to represent that in their lives and their, different scenarios, situations, whatever interactions that they have with other people. I think that they have to figure that out. My examples are just that, they're examples. I don't want them to respond the same way that I respond. I want them to take little nuggets from that and then decide, is this healthy for me? Is this how I want to respond? Right?
Yeah. I really appreciate that too. And that's one of my favorite things about my mom's parenting style, just like letting us go out there and make mistakes and learn from our mistakes, or just, try trial and error and giving us examples of like where to go next, or what is possible, what we could do. And I think what has come up in my life so far has been just people always thinking of Black people as a certain way. And I think I try to not take it personally because I know that's not necessarily people's fault, because like we were talking about, there is a certain way that Black people are portrayed over and over in media, in whatever arena. And unfortunately, like, some Black people have fallen into the trap of thinking that that's how we are and not being brave enough, or anything else, whatever you want to say, to step out of that and truly be themselves. However, there is a whole crop of Black people who, most of us, I would say, are definitely ourselves, no matter what environment we are in. And I think at the end of the day, that is what strengthens me, is like trusting in who I am, and being able to represent that and not try to tell all of our stories with just my story. And there was something I wanted to say. I kind of forgot right now, but it might come back up.
Okay, well, Nafees, you can let us how you feel while he's thinking about that.
Kind of, I feel like the conversations that me and you have is
Speak up.
I think always, I don't know.
You want to come back to me?
Yeah, come back to me.
And so for me, this is a sensitive topic, because working and volunteering and being considered a community activist, you know, oftentimes I find myself in conversations, you know, with other Black people or, you know, other people who are activists. And oftentimes, you know, the conversation about including, you know, African thought or African ways is usually not something that is sustainable, in my opinion. It's in the moment, you know, where somebody might want to say, we're going to pour libation, and that's going to be the African, you know, part of this ceremony. But my thing is, what other things that we have that are fundamentally African that can be incorporated in the way that we're doing this thing that can be sustainable, you know? Yeah. Because everything that's written, when I look at workshops at work or anything like that, I can see the underlying factor came from somebody's cultural influence, you know what I mean? And how they approach it, how they're talking to each other. You know, are we breaking for food or are we having tea? You know, which is the thing that, you know, if you go to an Indian meeting, professional meeting, they're always going to have tea because that's their culture. You know what I mean? But if you go to another race, for instance, a Mexican, you know, meeting, they're not going to have tea. They might have some melon juice or something like that, but that's their, you know what I mean? And the thing is for me, it's important to know what those ways are so that I can know how to show respect for different people. And at the same time, have my own ways to offer, because people oftentimes we're taking on so many other people's customs and just making it about wearing African fabric when we're doing it, you know. You know, I'm grateful for people like Mama Adero, you know, in Atlanta, who offers information about traditional African things and just history that not even know that they've been telling the story that's been whitewashed, but it's really an African story. You know, I like to be able to say, no, this is an African way to greet people when you speak to them, or show respect for your elders, you know, or offer food when someone comes to your home, you know what I mean, or not wear shoes in the house. That's a very normal thing for African people, as opposed to all we do is ever just pour libations and, you know, talk about our ancestors. That's what some people think that that's it when it comes to incorporating something African. So whenever I'm talking to Nafees, I try to make sure that I encourage him to just, you know, think about the principles of what we've talked about and try to incorporate that in your daily life. It's not something you're going to have to make an announcement about, hey, you guys, this is African, you know, it's
right.
You know what I mean? And if you know me to be an African person, then you know that this is just a part of my identity. So when you think of African people, you could say, yeah, I know, just like them Indian, my Indian friends were drinking tea. When I come to Nafees's house, he's going to probably want to eat, you know, or he's going to make sure that we all eat, you know what I mean? Because that's just a thing that is traditionally African, or maybe African in his way. So, did you remember, Nadir?
I did. I think, not I think, but someone once told me to choose my battles. It's Babu Kessa. Babu Kessa Matumoyo. But he told me, because it did, like this, our situation with this question did come up. And he's like, you know, think about the situation. What do you want to do? And do you think it's going to be worth it? And I think with this question of representing ourselves in these interracial relationships is what is going to be the result? What are my intentions with this situation? And do I have to put my foot forward to do a specific thing, whatever that thing is? And I think that relieves a lot of stress and a lot of like mind numbingness in terms of, oh my God, what's going to happen if I do this? Because the choices are clear once you just are aware of how much energy you want to put into a situation. Like, is this really worth it? You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a sign of maturity, I think, and experience. So I'm glad that you are evolving and getting to a point of, you know, knowing when to choose your battles.
Thank you.
Did you remember? You're welcome.
What I wanted to say was kind of along the lines that Nadir said, was basically, like what you've kind of instilled in me is, knowing if you say this and this, it might be the reaction that you might get from it, especially talking to other races, and not feel like you said, you have to tell them everything, or even with people of you know, the same race. I feel like sometimes, you know, going to HBCU, sometimes I'll be like, oh, I have a chip on my shoulder because I'm conscious or something like that. But there'll be sometimes I feel like I don't have to share this. They just, you know, I don't know. But I definitely, I think definitely just being able to definitely like choose your battles and know when is a good time to say something or when is a good time to bring a topic up. Because sometimes when you bring it up, the timing could be wrong and it could throw a lot of misunderstanding.
Yeah, kind of just understanding what's the reason I'm bringing this up and what's the purpose of it. Kind of like you were saying, Nadir. That's very important. So my next question has to do with traveling. I know that all of us have traveled internationally. And I don't have to ask whether it's important or not. So I'd like to rephrase say, as far as maintaining your identity, how has international travel been important to you as far as maintaining your identity? Because oftentimes I've learned that I'm a whole other person, you know, when I went to the continent or when I had a chance to travel to Asia, you know, or Europe, it's a whole different world, you know, because these are people who haven't been around you. They don't know your culture. All they've seen is what they've seen on TV if they chose to watch it. But everybody in other countries is not sitting watching Black people all day. That's, you know, they have their own lives too. They have things that they're interested in, although they do watch us, you know, when they have the interest. But how has that been for you, you know, as far as international travel is concerned?
You can go first.
Okay. I've only been out of the country twice. And then I'm also going to talk about.
Some of our listeners haven't gone at all, so 2 times is
Oh, for sure.
And where did you go?
And I'm also going to talk about like just traveling in the United States too, because sometimes that could feel like international travel.
Yeah.
But I went to Guatemala for a class, and then I also have been to Cuba. But I also been to Cuba, and I think that in Guatemala, I experienced a lot of staring and like just people wondering about me, and I'm like also kind of looking at them, wondering about them, and I don't know if this happens to other races of people, but traveling kind of exposed me to different perspectives and different ways of life, like you were talking about in your preface, just how experiencing those different cultures and how people approach living on earth, that has expanded just my own way of being in a ton of different ways that were unexpected. Like in Guatemala, it's very normal to be spiritual throughout the day. And whether that means you practice Catholicism or a mixture of Catholicism and the Guatemalan or the Mayan culture's spirituality, or whatever you choose to practice, everybody is kind of spiritual in their own way. And with the effects of globalism inside of that country, a lot of people are starting to move more towards like our way of, well, I don't want to say ours in this group, but just the United States way of life of kind of more consumerism and modernism and things like that. And I don't know if from our studies, it didn't seem like it was disrupting the spiritual aspects that much, but I could see how the younger generations might fall prey to that, and how that has affected, because that's affected our communities in the United States, with like Black people not necessarily moving away from churches or just other spiritual ways of practicing things. And I think that when I've traveled internationally, seeing how everybody is being affected by U.S. imperialism or colonization, and how different cultures are approaching healing, and just even how they talk to each other and communicate on a daily basis. Those things have helped me to be like, this is something that I thought of that I would really like to redo at home and to bring back with me, and to also maybe think of things that I don't necessarily like and things that I had a sense of that I didn't like before, but now I feel more assured that it's not something that I really want to do.
Okay. Yeah, I think for me, I love travel. I love traveling throughout the United States. I love traveling internationally, and I haven't traveled internationally that much. I've traveled to Jamaica twice, and although Hawaii is in the U.S., it felt like going to another country. And it was the best trip. But the first time that I went to Jamaica, I stayed with one of my close friends at the time, and she's from Jamaica, but she's been in the United States for many years, but she still has family in Jamaica. And so we stayed locally with her father. And so I got a chance to get the experience of what it's like living with the locals, which I absolutely loved. And that's kind of the experience that I want whenever I travel internationally, is to be with someone who knows the culture, who's from the country, and to be able to really experience what it's like to live in that country. And you couldn't tell me I wasn't Jamaican when I was there. I really loved it. I was just all up in the culture, and thinking I could speak patois. It was fun. But I recently went back for my cousin's wedding last year, and I had a blast. And we stayed. This time we did the whole resort and all that good stuff, which was a lot of fun. And I think, being as though now I'm 41, and that the first time I went was at least 20 years ago, the experience now versus then was so different. Like I felt more like I was on the outside looking in, the experience was just so different. Like, and then having a conversation with our driver on the way to the airport, and he was just expressing to me how he visited the US and how he hated it. And he was just like, I could never live there. I could never live in the US. And he was just like, I love being Jamaican. I love being in Jamaica. You couldn't convince me that there's no other better place to live than Jamaica, and I mean, I guess, but I'm wide open to travel all over the world. I mean, I'm similar to what you said, Yasmin. I like to just immerse myself in the culture. Like I love Japanese culture. That's one of the experiences I want.
We got to do it.
Yeah. It's one of the experiences that I want. I would love to one day I want to go to Japan. And of course I want to go to the homeland. I want to go to Africa, and experiencing right now, Dale is with one of his business partners, my husband Dale. He's building a home in Senegal, and just hearing them communicate with the locals there, because they're doing everything with the locals. The locals are helping them, they're hands-on, they're building everything with the house. And it's fascinating how they are communicating with the locals and learning the language, and learning about the culture in the area that they're in, over by the Pink Lake. And just everything, the possibilities are just wide open, that we could end up moving there ourselves temporarily. If it hits the fan here in the US, we got a place to escape to. It's just like, I want to go to Ghana. It's, there's just so many places to explore. And I would have to say, given the current situation of COVID-19, that I am a little nervous now, like before March, or actually before, because of course, if you were following the news, you heard about everything that was happening in China long before March, before they shut everything down here. I was already starting to feel a little anxious about traveling, because then you're hearing so many different things. You're hearing it's nothing to worry about from the conspiracy theorists. You're hearing, that we'll never be able to stop wearing masks when we go outside. So it's just like, what are we gonna do? And so I'm trying to deal with that anxiety and not allow those outside forces to prevent me from wanting to live my best life. And to really want to explore and get to know, because I really think that exploring different cultures helps you to learn a different part of yourself, because I always feel like a different person whenever I come back. And what Nadir said, even when we are traveling here in the US, like even not too far away, just down south in Indian Springs in the state park, it can be a whole different world just right here in the United States. And I enjoy getting out and about, backpacking, hiking, all of that.
I would definitely say when I went to Malaysia, I love Malaysia. I think that was, if I could ever go to a place again, I would love to travel back to Malaysia. And the reason why is they call Malaysia the land of diversity, and there's many different cultures there. But also when I was there, like you were saying, Nadir, I was getting stared at a lot. And it made me have to be open that, a lot of people haven't seen African Americans, especially with locks. And like one experience that I've always kept in my mind is I was working with kids in a after school program, and they got to ask us any questions they wanted to. And one kid asked me, he was like, "Oh, is your hair like fake? Is it artificial?" No, and like his like mind was like exploded. So I definitely like going to Malaysia gave me more of appreciation of myself and of more of my culture that that I was raised in, and also being Muslim just definitely been just trying to get more of a grasp of it. Definitely like I've been stopped by monks and just wanted to take pictures of it was just definitely like
feeling like a celebrity.
Yes, feeling like a celebrity just because of the color of my skin, and I was like. It was just crazy to me, but it was also just eye-opening of how, some people just haven't seen Black people in their lives before. So definitely just being more appreciative.
Yeah. And before I ask the next question, I've had the chance to travel outside of the United States a lot. Maybe in my life, it's been about maybe 10 times. And within those times, it's always different. Like it's completely, I feel like it's a whole nother world, really. It's not even Earth anymore. It's just different. The world, everything's different, and you get a chance to see how much of what we thought was the real world is not the real world. Like Nadir, how you were talking, I remember traveling to Turkey once and learning that there's completely different understanding of puberty there, that we have. They don't even look at it the same. And there's this whole party that they have for boys when they turn like 11 years old that everybody knows in the whole city that he's reached puberty. Wearing this outfit, he got these shiny clothes on and stuff like that, and that's when they're circumcised as well. Wow. So it's really strange. It's really strange, right? You see, our reaction is all the same because it's based on our experience, in the United States. But I just remember the first time I saw it, we were at a restaurant, and I saw this little boy, dressed up. And I saw that, and I was like, wow, that's interesting. He has this because they have a little sword that they have on their clothes, and I thought that was pretty weird for a little boy to be at a restaurant with a sword on his clothes, But what do I know? I don't know what their family has going on. So then I seen him again, and it was happening, maybe the fourth time, and I asked, what is that? What is that about? And the lady couldn't speak English, so she started doing this.
No.
About, And I tell this story because it led to this really great conversation about how, what they do for their puberty, party, basically, where boys are very much celebrated for their puberty. They reach puberty at whatever age they do, but that's also the age that they circumcise them. And everyone showers them with these gifts, and they wear these like outfits and they have this huge party. And I told her about our experience in the United States where it's just painful for babies and that's it, sometimes women have period parties for girls, but for young men, there's usually nothing that happens when a young man reaches puberty, you know what I mean? So it led to a really good conversation about what I wanted to do for Nafees because he hadn't reached puberty yet, to give me an idea that he should be celebrated too, you know what I mean? It's a change in his life, and I learned that outside of the United States. So that's my appreciation. Every time I've traveled, I've learned something new, and I've also been very grateful for what I had to offer too, because the worst thing is coming into a situation where everybody has all these cultural stories and stuff, and I'm sitting there with just the story about the electric slide or something. Like, what do you have to offer? So it made me more encouraged to learn my history, to be able to have something to offer when I'm interacting with people in general, but definitely people outside of the United States.
Yeah.
So I want to ask this last question, and I want to specifically ask for advice for people who need advice on how to talk to their young people about encouraging them to travel internationally and what that looks like as far as maintaining your identity and also being able to receive, from people who are outside of your race when you are traveling internationally.
Yeah. I want to just say to be open, for sure, to be open to the idea and to start doing online research about whatever country. Just pick a country, pick any country, and do some research to see if what that country has to offer may be something that you'd be interested in checking out. Because for me, it's not just about seeing the people. I want to see architecture. I want to see the art. I want to learn about, their music, their food, and so if you start with looking either in books or online and doing a little bit of research to see what may interest you about one particular country, and then find out even what their race relations are like. Do a lot of Black people visit there? Do Black people live there? Because it is a reality that we do have to consider what are the race relations in any country that we're going to visit. And, you know, just so that we are aware of it, we, you know, you might even want to know once you start planning, how far is the police station from your hotel room, you know, because you have to be careful. You got to have a contingency plan for any scenario. And, you know, a friend of mine, her daughter is studying Korean. And so she traveled to Korea, and she was sharing her experience there and how she did experience racism and how it can be really blatant. Like it could be really in your face, where people are just like, no, I don't date. Like, I'm fascinated with, they'll literally tell you, I want to take a picture with you, I'm fascinated with you, but I would never date you. They literally told her that, you know, and she loves their culture, but she also had great experiences where she made friendships, and they're long lasting friendships, and she wants to go back, you know. And so you do have to be aware that there are going to be some bumps in the road, but that's okay. You'll make it through it, build some relationships, learn about the culture, you know, and stay open for sure. Know where the embassy is. Something go down, you got to know.
Yeah, I did all that. Like, that felt really good to me. And another thing that I've been thinking about is languages and just being able to communicate. And that's like one of the things that's kind of scared me about traveling, is just I don't know how to speak, you know, any other language really. And I think a lot more people in the world are bilingual or just know another language, especially English, more than US people do.
Sure.
And I think that's cool, because then you can probably find somebody that speaks English. But that's something that I'm still working through too, just trusting that I'll still have a good time even if I don't speak the language of the country I'm about to go to. And that someone that I know, one of my close friends, they really inspire me because they are really fearless, and they just go out and travel and do stuff that they like really want to do in the world without having that block or that scare that we won't be able to connect just because we're different in some way. And I think that's one of the biggest advices. And it speaks back to what she said about being open, because I think that's a form of being open, just making sure that you have a clear mind in what your intentions are. Because when you travel to another country, you're not just like coming over there to look through a zoo exhibit. You're going there to you're going there to experience another part of the world and somebody else's and other people's lives, and really to get a different perspective on what life can be on Earth. And I think if we're really truly open to that experience, then it'll bring beautiful things no matter where we go.
Absolutely.
I would definitely say, like Mama Adero said, like, do your research, but also like when you go there, I feel like when you do your research and then you go there, sometimes like those two might not like match sometimes.
All the way.
Sometimes, like, I might do some research in place and I might go there and I'm like, well, this is not what I expected at all. So definitely always have an open mind and not, you know, always take the information, but sometimes don't take it to heart. But sometimes you might get a misunderstanding and it might, you know, ruin your trip, or it might just put like I don't know, it might just hurt your feelings. But also just try, and also, you know, whatever chance you got to travel, definitely take it, because you never know of the opportunities that it might bring. And also you get to, you know, stamp your passport.
Absolutely.
You know, for our listeners, I always encourage travel in any way, you know, whether it's domestic or international, as far as helping to build communication within your family. Because one thing that I've learned on me and Nafees's trips, that we've traveled wherever we were going, and it could have been Boston, or, you know, it could have been Cuba. I learned that we communicated differently, you know, because we were all that we knew when we went there. You know, I was the familiar person that he knew, and the same for me, but we were both trying something new. So, you know, we were trusting each other in a different type of way. You know, it wasn't, you know, the same trust that we have in the United States where everybody's the same. It's like, wait a minute, the only person I know here is you. So we have to talk about what's going on and what we want to do and what we want to learn. And it helped me to learn, you know, what his interests were, because some of the stuff I was interested in when we went to Canada was totally different than his. You know, I'm really interested in, let's try the new waffles with ice cream on them. Like, I don't really want to try that first. first, you know. They kind of let me know, you know, what type of stuff that he's interested in, which led me to be able to have different types of conversations, you know. So even outside of our identity, you know, when we traveled, it let us be able to just be closer in our communication. So anybody who's listening, we definitely encourage travel in any way. Don't just stay in your city, wherever you live. Travel out of your city, you know, learn what type of neighboring states you have and what they have to offer, you know. And there's a lot of stuff that can be done for free too, because I know some people that are listening are probably thinking, you're talking about traveling because you got money, but we don't.
Planning.
A lot of times we travel, we find, you know, real cheap tickets, you know, or something like that. And we make a plan on what we're going to do for free. We do a lot of walking, you know, and we
walking.
A lot of local places where we can get a good, nice, big plate of food, you know. Yeah. And then we also know what's the fancy stuff so that we can compare it, you know what I mean? And like Nafees said, it's funny, you know, when you might research a place, some of the stuff that's listed online is based on someone else's experience, you know. So sometimes I'll research and I'll have 3 different, you know, research projects. Well, I'll say this is a mom who went, this is a father who went, this is a young person who went, and I'll compare the stories to see, like, what do I want to take from each of those, you know, experiences. But we definitely want to encourage travel, and we definitely want to encourage healthy conversations about identity. We want to thank you both for being here with us today. This has been a really good conversation. I appreciate, you know, the example that you all are showing in establishing a home on the continent, in Senegal. You know, I've heard beautiful things about Senegal. They have the best jollof. If anybody's listening for the jollof, you know, awards, I think they got the best jollof rice, you know, so I would love to visit Senegal one day. So I wish you all good luck, you know, with that particular family.
Thank you.
Welcome. This has been another episode of Between Us and Y'all. We want to thank our listeners for listening. We hope that what the Preston family has offered to us has been beneficial. It's been beneficial to us, but we hope it's been beneficial to our listeners. And as always, we like to part by encouraging our listeners to work hard, pray hard, love hard, and definitely spend time playing hard. And
thank you guys for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you
Peace. Love y'all.